The stage was now set for 3 battles which would change the fate of England. However, the significance of the first 2 of these are often overlooked. It started just as Harold Godwinson had allowed some of his troops to go back to their farms to bring in the harvest. He received word that Harald Hardrada had landed in the north. Harald Hardrada had set sail from Norway with Tostig and about 10,000 Vikings, plus some extra troops from the Orkneys and other locations. This was not just going to be some minor Viking raid, but instead Harald had assembled most of the fighting strength of his land. Once the forces had landed, he plundered some of the towns and villages around York, causing major consternation among the locals, especially in the city of York. And the area around York was actually crossed by a number of rivers, especially the River Ouse. This could enable the Vikings to travel a significant distance inland while still remaining with their boats. It also meant there were a number of natural water barriers that could be defended if a pitched battle took place. The local nobles, notably represented by Morcar, the Earl of Northumbria, and Edwin, the Earl of Mercia, rather decided to contain or even shadow the Viking forces, even then barricading themselves up in York till reinforcements from the south arrived. Instead, decided to fight a pitched battle just outside York at Fulford on the 20th of September 1066. This battle was a clash of infantry, with the English making good initial progress as they attacked Harold before his army was fully assembled. However, as more and more Viking troops arrived, the battle began to swing in the Vikings' favour, both sides making progress on opposite wings of the battle. Vikings then turned in towards the English centre, at which point the English army broke. Retreat from the battlefield was complicated by the river and marshes. It meant that English losses in the retreat were significant. However, once the English army had negotiated the river and associated marshes, the Viking infantry in their heavy armour couldn't fully exploit their victory, so a considerable part of the English army, including the commanders Morcar and Edwin, escaped. Vikings then went on quickly to take York, which the locals surrendered, so a large Viking army outside, and local English forces had been defeated. The city of York was taken intact and not looted, so Tostig intended to set up his headquarters in the city. And shortly after this, the Vikings were contacted about a prisoner swap, payment of gold, even possible surrender of the local area if all of it could be spared from looting. Tostig and Harald went with a portion of their army relatively short distance to Stamford Bridge to negotiate terms. At this point, weather was unseasonably hot for the time of year, with little wind. Feeling that they'd won a resounding victory, the troops didn't bother to take their heavy shields with them. Also, the troops took off their heavy armour, which was really cumbersome in the hot weather. However, Harold Godwinson had heard of the landing, decided to rapidly march his troops northward. Picking up some extra troops on the way north, he managed the rather spectacular feat of marching 185 miles, or the equivalent distance of 7 marathons, in just 4 days. On reaching the local area, he heard of the meeting at Stamford Bridge, decided to exploit what he thought was an opportunity to inflict a crushing defeat on the Vikings by going through an ambush. On the 25th of September 1066, Harold attacked the Vikings where the forces were split on either side of Stamford Bridge. Harold rapidly defeated the force on his side of the river. Then there was a legendary confrontation on the bridge itself, with a single Viking warrior delaying the English advance by holding bridge until he was stabbed from below. Now this may just be a legend, as other accounts say the English rapidly crossed the river via fords and other crossing points. Harald Hardrada then tried to organise a defence on a small rise near the river, and sent a message to the rest of his troops regarding the boats to hurry to his location. Harold Godwinson then attacked surrounding the defending Vikings, who without their shields couldn't form a shield wall, which was a standard defensive tactic of the time. Harold Godwinson also moved forces around the sides of the defenders, made their plight even worse, and the inevitable defeat followed. However, just as the last remaining Vikings, including Harald Hardrada and Tostig, were slain, reinforcements in full armour arrived and charged into English warriors. Initially, the new troops had some success, but eventually the numbers of Harold's army began to tell against the new arrivals, as did the efforts of the forced march to actually get to the battle in the first place. His Viking force was also defeated. After the battle, Harald Hardrada's young son, who remained with the boats, signed a peace treaty with Harold Godwinson, and less than 10% of the boats that had ferried the Vikings to England were needed to take the survivors back home again. This time, Harold Godwinson was rather happy with the events. He had secured England from invasion by Vikings for generations and still had a substantial part of his army intact. However, things were not really that good. Firstly, a large part of the local Northumbrian forces had been killed or wounded in the earlier battle, and in the fighting a significant number of Harold's housecarls had been killed or wounded, and these troops couldn't be quickly replaced. In addition to this, the forced marches and battles now meant that his army was exhausted, with some time to recover. Unfortunately for Harold, the unseasonal good weather also played such a major part in his victory that also enabled William to cross the Channel, and without an English army in the south, managed to successfully land all of his troops and supplies. With news of the Norman landings, Harold again marched his army south. The question as he marched his army south, though, was how to deal with the Normans now that they established themselves in England.